Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Second Cup with Keith. I'm your host, Keith Giles, and I am joined by my friend and author, Mary Terhune. Mary is, she's someone that has a lot of experience in this topic that we're going to be talking about. I guess I'll kind of let you introduce yourself, Mary. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and just so our listeners can know, like, who you are and where you're coming from.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me on your program, Keith. Well, first of all, I'm a registered nurse by training. And when I was working at a Beth Israel Hospital in Boston back in 1984, I had a spontaneous spiritual awakening as I was going through a crisis in my life. And this spontaneous awakening happened with the Master Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, and I can go into what happened with that, but I
Oh,
guess
yeah. No, that'd be that.
there's so much to talk about.
Right.
But it basically at a moment of crisis in my life where I just gave up all hope. And I was part of the Catholic Church growing up, but I had long given it up, given the dogma of it.
Yeah.
But when I was going through this crisis, I called out to God that I didn't believe in. I said, "Please, God, just let me die." It was
Wow.
so bad. I lost everything. I lost all my retirement funds. I had an 11-year-old to raise. I went into debt, and I was just done with life.
Yeah.
And in that moment, that's when this light entered my living room and began to speak to me
Wow.
on various topics. They were on forgiveness, judgment, the Bible, weight in emotions, disease, aging, and the ego.
Wow.
And as he did this, he also awakened the transformational energy in our body, which I came to know as the Kundalini.
Hmm.
At the time, had no understanding of what the Kundalini was, this spiritual energy of excuse me, I'm getting over a cold,
That's
this
okay.
transformational energy that rests in the bottom of our spine. And he awakened this energy. And I knew very little about the chakras. I had heard about them, but I
Yeah.
really didn't know if I believed in them. But he awakened this Kundalini energy, and I felt all the energy of the chakras moving, these wheels as he awakened it in my body. And when he did that, it awakened this enormous bliss in me,
Wow.
this absolute peace. And when he spoke these revelations to me, he gave me the understanding of forgiveness. He gave me the understanding of the ego. And I think the main teaching about forgiveness was he said, now do you understand that true forgiveness is self-forgiveness?
Uh,
That all you have to do is forgive yourself for everything you had to go through in this life, because we all have to go through things in this life.
right.
Just when you do that self-forgiveness, then all is forgiven. It's
Wow.
not about you have to, find a way to forgive somebody else or any of that. It's just this, I think that was one of the most powerful teachings, that just forgive yourself.
Right.
And that way you don't get into blaming others. You just
Right.
forgive yourself. That's it. And
Right.
not as blame or shame, but just we all have to go through things in this life to wake up
Yes.
to our divine nature,
Yes.
this amazing transformational energy, excuse me, that lives in us.
Hmm.
Um, After he finished awakening me, and then he awoke and he removed the veil in my third eye.
Yeah.
And when he did that, and this is all on an energy level,
Right.
when he did that, amazing things happened to me afterwards. And
Yeah.
after this protracted teaching me these various things, I went to the backyard just to get some fresh air. When he withdrew his light form, and when I looked out, I was astonished to see all these packets of light surrounding everything. And these packets of light, I understood was what the world was created from. And these
Yeah.
packets of light were filled with divine energy, filled with love. And out loud, I said, "Oh my God, this is paradise, but we've turned it into something else."
Yeah.
That we were given this beautiful gift of paradise called Earth, but
Yeah.
through our own identification as egos, as separate egos from our divine nature, we've created hell for ourselves and for others
Right.
through this. And needless to say, I mean, I was just so struck by this. I just burst out in tears and started crying with this understanding. Of course, it was later, it took me a long time to integrate what was happening to me because I thought, my God, this is the most important thing that ever can happen to a human being.
Right.
Why isn't anybody talking about it?
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody speak about divine light and awakening to this. Nothing, nothing. Of
Right.
course, I didn't know about the word consciousness at the time, that we are this living divine consciousness.
Yes.
And I would, after that, I thought, my God, goodness, I need a teacher on the earth in human form that I can speak to figure out what happened to me.
Right.
Because, at the time I was, as I said, I was working at the hospital in research administration, and part of my job was to figure out numbers, to work with numbers. So here I am in this blissful state of love just poured out of me.
Yeah.
And when I went back to work the next day, I didn't want to go back to work. I wanted to be like Eckhart Tolle and sit on a park bench for 2 weeks,
Sure. Sure.
to integrate all this and to just watch the love all around me, because consciousness is all around me, but we can't see it. We don't
Right.
experience it unless we experience it in ourselves.
Right.
So when I went to work, I would sit at my desk trying to work with these numbers, and I couldn't do it. They made no sense to me. Like,
Right.
this is just, I couldn't do it. And eventually, the office was reorganized because the director could see there was something going on. And so then I left with, some severance pay,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was very nice. And at this time, I was also graduating from my third year in massage school, because by this time I had entered the field of natural medicine, or healing in natural ways.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought I was going to become a clinical psychologist. That was where I was sort of trending towards.
Yeah.
But that just got washed away. And now I entered this field of spirituality that I knew nothing about. And when someone told me, you entered a spiritual path, I said, what's a spiritual path?
Right.
I had no idea. So
Yeah.
when I asked the universe, saying to the universe, I need a teacher, I need a teacher, because the way I equated the energy and the light was Einstein's theory of relativity,
Uh
E
huh.
equals mc squared.
Yeah.
So I kept going to different talks by different sort of spiritual teachers. And I'm thinking, no, that's not it. They don't get it.
Yeah.
And eventually I went to a talk on energy and medicine at Interface, which is now defunct in Watertown, Mass. And I went there, and there's a panel of people speaking about energy medicine. And everybody got up and they introduced themselves and said what they had to say, except for one person who stood up, and the first words out of his mouth was E equals mc squared, Einstein's theory of relativity. I
Whoa.
thought, this is the guy I need to talk
He
to.
gets it. Yeah.
So after that, I ran over to him and I grabbed his arm and I said, because he was an energy healer, and I said, I have to see you. I have to set up an appointment with you. And when I went to the appointment, I walked into his office and he said, I have to do something for a moment. I'll be right back. And on his wall was a picture of this monk. And when I walked over to the picture, because I was also looking for a pair of eyes that had a lot of depth to it.
Yeah.
And when I walked over to the picture, I went, that's the one. Those are the pair of eyes. That's the teacher I want to see. And I had no idea who this was. And in that moment, the picture came alive.
Whoa.
And she spoke to me and said, we're coming together again to complete something.
Whoa.
And at that point, she showed a clip of a movie that I had been a monk of hers in a past life. but that I couldn't complete my journey then. And we're coming
Ah,
together now so I can complete my journey. And I didn't know a journey to what,
yeah.
I just thought, well, this is what I have to meet this teacher. So when the healer walked back into the room, I said, who is this anyway? And he told me her name. And then he said, she's going to be in Boston in 2 weeks. You want to meet her? I go, yeah, I want to meet her. And my healing with him was only supposed to be for about an hour, but it lasted 6 hours.
Oh my
As
gosh.
and I didn't realize that when I looked into this teacher's eyes, that she was also a Shaktipat guru, like Jesus, who could awaken your Kundalini energy. Because, the
Wow.
great sages, this is the power to help humanity awaken to this within themselves. As Jesus said, the kingdom of God lives within. That's
Right.
what he meant. He could have said, your divine consciousness lives within. Go there,
Right.
you know. And so I didn't realize that I had another powerful download of this awakening within me. So I was sobbing through this thing, this whole treatment with this energy. He was sobbing, I was sobbing. There was so
Wow.
much that happened, and light poured through my body and out my hands and my meridians. And I thought, oh, these meridians are true because I experienced so the light poured out of me, out my feet. And I thought, oh, Jesus has light portrayed coming out of him. The saints do. Mary
Yes.
does. It's all the same. This is what they heal with. But I didn't realize that it was my light, that it was our
Right.
light, the light within humanity. I
Yeah.
was still personifying my divinity outside myself and
Yes. There's
calling
something
it God
external. Yeah.
when it's internal.
Yes.
And then when it's internal, it becomes Brahman, this ultimate field of a divine being
Yeah.
that we all are, beyond religion, before religion,
Yes.
and that it belongs to us. And at this time for humanity, right now on this planet, we're having a big breakup with the egoic structure
Yes.
and reclaiming our divine nature. We're living not so much in a horizontal world of separation, but an internal world of unity, cosmic unity, and reclaiming ourselves as divine beings, and
Yeah.
then creating structures that reflect that instead of the structures now that don't reflect that and are
Right.
basically on material level. And so everything is changing. We're finding our governments don't serve us, our medical system isn't serving us, our mental health system isn't serving us, educational systems aren't serving us.
Our,
People
our
are
religious
becoming
our religious structures aren't serving us. Yeah.
are not structured, and
Yeah.
everything is causing separation in the ego structure where you separate
Yes.
yourself from everybody else, and you cause friction and hate for other and all kinds of suffering.
Yes.
So people are awakening up and rediscovering this in themselves. And the biggest moment that I had was when I did meet that monk, and I did go to see her and be with her, me and a couple of thousand other people.
Sure.
Excuse me.
And what was her name?
I'm
Who was
clearing
this
things
person?
out. But I don't name her because
Oh, okay.
I don't want anyone to think that I speak for any particular path.
Right. Okay.
Everybody has a path to divinity.
Right.
So that's why I don't name her. If people want to know personally, they can
Sure.
contact me. But
Okay.
otherwise, I'm not a spokesperson for any particular path or any particular way. There
Right.
could be 1,000 million ways
Right.
to one's divinity. So for me, that was my personal path. That's what I needed. I
Yeah.
needed a teacher, and that's
Good.
what I asked for, and that's what I got.
Good. Yes.
So, but everybody may not need that, but that's what I needed.
Right. Or they'll take a
And
different path and find their own way. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So that's why I don't get into that. Um,
Okay. That's yeah, totally fair.
so when
Yeah,
I,
I
so when
understand
I,
that because yeah, I real quick, I'm the same way in the sense of like I'm very sensitive about becoming like I don't want to become anybody's guru. And I also
no,
encourage people on this show and other places when I speak and write
right,
that, people need to, in some ways, be their own guru. Like, discover
Yes.
that voice within, right? Discover
Discover
your own
this.
divine consciousness, your own connection. And there's a danger,
Yes.
I feel. I mean, so like you're saying in your experience, you needed a teacher, and that we do.
Mm.
Teaching is good. You need someone to explain things to you. The danger
Right.
I see is sometimes we gravitate so much to that other person. We allow that other person to sort of we live vicariously through that person's spiritual experience
Yeah.
rather
And
than
that's
having our
not,
own. Yeah,
yeah. And that's not, a true teacher will never teach you
that's right.
that.
That's
A
right.
true teacher will say it's in you. And
Yes.
that's why I gravitated to this particular monk,
Yeah.
because that was always her teaching. It's
Yeah.
in you. It's in you.
That's right.
And yes, you can see that this being, this person in human form has already experienced profound divine self-realization and
Yeah.
is lives from that state. To say it's in humanity to discover that in themselves and to live there 24/7.
Yes.
No easy task, because
Right.
you have to make your way out of, having a breakup with your egoic structure and
Yes.
having your kundalini awaken. It awakens all the issues that you have to deal with in this life from here down. Because, after I met her, it was 2 years after that, that I experienced self-realization, this experience of total, full
Yeah.
um, experience as Brahman, as this divine being. And when I experienced this, it was changed me forever. It just
Yeah.
completely changed me. And I got to experience the freedom from egoic mindset for about 30 minutes.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, I'm free. I'm totally free.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I would have to go back.
Right.
I would have to go back
Yeah.
and handle whatever I needed to handle in this life to finally be free, to reclaim this again, but this time permanently. And this is
Yeah.
kind of where humanity finds itself in these crosshairs, in this, it's really difficult to have to go back and then deal with all these issues, as Mary, with a personality and a persona and a body, but knowing that I'm divine and beyond that, but you still
Yeah.
have to deal with it.
Yeah.
These issues that you deal with are doorways to your divinity. So it's not like you can't skip over things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever it is you're meant to deal with it, which is written in your chakras, by the way. It's all written here. The story from here down is written. All the things you have to go through, relationships, everything that you have to go through in life
Yeah.
to help you awaken, so that you say, wait a minute, what's going on here? I don't feel like I'm just a story of suffering. There's got
Right.
to be more,
Uh-huh.
and there is more. But on the way to discovering that, you have to deal with the issues, and that is not easy.
Yeah.
That is difficult. And you have to sort of be a warrior within yourself to reclaim yourself.
Yes.
So when that happened to me, this incredible experience of my nature as Brahman and being free for like 30 minutes, the first thing that fled was fear. I no longer had fear. I was just living in this divine bliss, not
Mm.
blissed out. I was more present in that than I certainly was in the separative egoic state.
Yeah.
I'm far much more aware. And the feeling in it is bliss and unfettered love, not as an object subject, but just as love, because its nature is love. And then I would happen to be outside at a meditation center at the time, and I saw people walking across the lawn as I was in this state, and I could see their soul hovering above them. And
Wow.
I could see that they were stuck in their mind, and I wanted them to look up to their divine nature. But I couldn't shout it out to do that.
Right.
And as I'm having the experience, I am Brahman, and all this is my creation. I look up, and above one of the buildings was Jesus rising in a cloud with his hands going up. And I'm like, what's he doing here? What is this all about? And I thought, oh, I'm ascending in a
Uh-huh.
physical body. And he's
Yeah.
showing me. And then many years later, I read an accounting in Luke, one of Luke's sayings. And he said, when you see Jesus rising in a cloud, know that your redemption is drawing near.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's what he was trying to tell me. Jesus was coming, saying it again. Even though this teacher was from the East, well, Jesus is from the East.
That's right.
So
That's right.
what's the difference? There's no difference.
Yes.
And in far as these realized beings who have come to show us our own light, they're beyond country. They're beyond religion. They're
Yes.
beyond dogma. They're just showing us pure being, saying,
Uh-huh.
you are that. Reclaim it no matter what that you hear. Just reclaim this in you. And
Yeah.
then create a world from that state of being, this state of being. It's a state of being, or you can call it a state of consciousness.
Yes.
So it changed the way I looked, many years as later on. And then that was in the July of 1988 that I experienced that. And in October, I was working at MIT at the time, uh, managing an office at the Space Center, and I would meditate on a bench inside the electrical engineering building, which
Uh,
faces out at Mass Avenue, big windows and everything. And I would meditate because I started taking up meditation and just to connect inside myself,
yeah.
to get out of the discursive mind that's always yakking away. And I had an experience of my own death as I went to meditate. One of the monks from this particular lineage showed up and in meditation, and I thought, oh my God, this is really true. You can actually, this is really real.
Yeah.
When this happens, I mean, he had already passed over, and I was thinking about him, thinking, wow, I wish I could have met him. And all of a sudden, he shows up, and he enters my being and takes me out, taking
Ooh.
me to windows of heaven. And when I reached these windows, which happened very quickly, I wanted to go because
Yeah.
the light pouring is so magnificent. It's like home. I'm home. I'm
Yeah.
finally going home. I'm free. But when I went to go towards those windows to enter into the incredible light that we truly are, he said, not yet. And I had to go back
Uh-huh.
into this human form. And when I had to go back, I ended up having to focus on, because now I was in light body of consciousness, had to focus on this cord, this cord that connects us, uh, the silver cord that connects us to our physical existence. And when that cord is cut completely, then you leave your body and
Right.
go on. But I had to still have the cord, and I had to go back, so I had to follow this cord. So I was very far away, and I realized that when a vista opened up of our solar system, and I had to follow the cord. It was sort of like on a zoom. I was
Yeah.
zooming past the planets, and I thought, I
Yeah.
wonder what planet I'm going to. Excuse me. And finally, I reached North America, and I thought, oh, I'm going to planet Earth. And
Yeah.
then I thought, oh, I'm going to Massachusetts, and it would zoom like a zoom.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I found myself at the roof or the ceiling of the engineering building at MIT, looking down at a body that's meditating.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh, that's the body I have to go back into. And I didn't know what gender I was. I didn't know,
Wow.
I didn't have any attachment to this body whatsoever. No
Wow.
attachment to a story, no attachment to separative life as Mary. I was consciousness living as consciousness, free from
Wow.
time and space. And when I
Man.
entered the body, I went back in the way I had come out, and it just entered back in. And it was like a thump, it was like boom. And it was a terrible feeling because I was like in a tight shoe, now squeezed into this
Yep.
discursive mind, personality, body again. And I thought, oh no, this is terrible. And with that, the monk showed up again and said, you see, the veil is very thin between here and there, very
Right.
thin. And then
Right.
poof, he just disappeared. And it was at that moment that death died for me because I realized, oh my God, It's your consciousness that is real and has true living life that feeds this vehicle,
Yeah.
making it appear alive. But this flesh has no life without
Right.
divine consciousness living in it. And I
Right.
thought, oh, you can't die. And
Right.
then I
Your
thought, wait
body,
a
your
minute.
body could die, but you, which is really you, that divine consciousness,
Well,
never dies.
the body doesn't actually die because it had no life.
Oh,
It
okay.
appears like the physical is alive, but it's
I
not.
see. Yes.
So when I had the realization of, oh my God, you can't die. And then I thought, then you can't be the opposite either. How can you be born
Uh,
if you never died, if you can't die? And then I realized the whole thing was an illusion.
yeah.
And then there's this poem. I'm not sure if it was Hafiz or Kabir, that said, when you're born, everyone is laughing, but you are crying. And when you
Ooh,
die, everyone is crying, but you are laughing.
what a great quote. I love that.
And then I realized, oh my God, you know,
Yeah.
we have this whole thing about death, which is aimed at making us feel fear, keeping us locked in fear. When and that's just another control mechanism. We just have
Yes.
to release all of that and have our own experience. And as people are awakening here, they're releasing a lot of unlearning. There's a lot of unlearning that has to happen. And you have to go through what I call karmic cleanup.
Yeah.
The karmic
Yeah.
cleanup crew of your own kundalini. And we all go through it. I go through it. We're all
Yeah.
in this together
Yeah.
in the same boat of divinity that humanity finds itself. And one of the other things that happened with me, because I'm a nurse, I trained as a nurse, I was very interested in the health field. I was introduced to homeopathic medicine 14 years after my original awakening with Jesus, when he did talk about disease. What's one of the things he talked about? And he said, do you see now that is created in energy first, and then it feeds into the physicals. And that's when symptoms show up.
Wow.
You have to deal with this. And of course, at that time, I didn't know how does one do that. But it was 14 years later when I had my own health crisis, where my thyroid was failing with Hashimoto's and autoimmune, that I realized I have to find out a cure for this because I can't take the drugs. The drugs made me sick. I thought,
Yeah.
get out. So I said a prayer to my teacher. I said, please show me someone who can cure me and explain what's behind this. And I want a cure. I can't take drugs. And so the very next day I went to work, and a colleague, when I told her this, she handed me a flyer. And then she said, well, then you're going to need homeopathic medicine. And I'm like, homeopathic medicine? What's that?
Yeah.
And so I realized this was the answer. And I called up the homeopath, who happened to also be a registered nurse and a homeopath. So I went to see her, and it was this long. Before I went to see her, she had me do a timeline of never well since events in my life. And I saw, including in utero, when my mother was pregnant with me. And I saw, as I asked my mother about when she was pregnant with me, did something happen? And she said, yes, I lost my mother in the 8 months of pregnancy. And it was a terrible grief for me because my mother was my support in my life. She was my best friend in my life. And I just felt destitute and
Mm.
grief. So that was layered on me in utero. So when I was born in a grief state
Yeah.
without realizing it. It was only when I found homeopathy and saw the timeline of events in my life, of grief events in relationships and nurturing, did I see the connection. And then what's the cure? How do you deal with it? And homeopathy, the homeopathic medicine was once part of our medical system in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about this in my book. And I'm also going to talk more deeply about homeopathy in the book as part of it, as well as spiritual awakening, and as well as death, my death experience, explaining what happened exactly, and homeopathic medicine, and then how we're going to change our system of psychology. It's
Yeah.
based on pathology, and we're in a crisis of that. I'm going to talk about my experience, what happened to me when I used acupuncture. It's quite extraordinary. And to explain, when you're waking up now, waking this way, you go through a lot of crazy stuff.
Right.
stuff like that. What the heck happened there? So I talk about that, but homeopathic medicine was the great preventative and curative system once in the United States. It was once practiced and taught in our hospitals by our doctors, but Rockefeller had it removed so that there would only be these synthetic petrochemical drugs,
Yeah.
which act, which can save lives. I'm not saying you have to throw out everything. I'm just saying you have to add in homeopathic
Yes.
medicine once again,
Yeah. It's
because we
incomplete.
need trauma medicine. We
Yeah.
we need trauma medicine. I've used it. It's helped me, but I'm looking for prevention and cure now. Let's start our lives in that. So we don't need all this trauma stuff. So we're not, filling up our emergency rooms, and we don't have enough doctors, and we don't have enough this. People need to be educated as well in this basic method of helping yourself with symptoms, acute issues before they become chronic. I'm
Yes.
looking at real prevention and cure. And I really think nurses are the way to this. I really think nurses should be trained in homeopathic medicine and that should come back into our clinics. So this is one of the things I'm
Yeah.
fighting for.
Yeah.
But I teach homeopathic information and medicine to the general public so they can understand it. And, you know, or if people have questions about death or awakening or their spiritual issues or things that like they just want to feel affirmed and heard for the first
Yes.
time.
Yes.
I have on my website, I have conversations with Mary where you can set up sessions with me, 30 minutes or an hour session, conversations with Mary on my website, maryterhune.com. So that people need support. We need to be educated and re-educated in this to remember
Yeah.
all of this, how to heal ourselves. So I went through all of that, and it's been quite the path. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going through it along with everybody else,
Right.
just that I have a little bit more information, perhaps,
Right.
a little bit more knowledge in it to support others. I'm not
Yes.
teaching anything new. We're just remembering.
Right.
And so I'll help people if they want to speak about these issues or if they wonder if homeopathy could help them in a particular way. I have two practitioners that I use that I send people to. I don't take cases anymore, but I'm more on an educational level.
Right.
And so if people want to know about that, they can always book a session with me and do it that way. So is there
Okay.
anything else particular that you wanted to know? I mean,
Yeah.
there's
No.
so
Yeah.
much to talk about.
I was. I have so many questions, so I was just waiting for you to. I wanted you to be able to
Mm,
tell your story. Well, I want to go back to your Kundalini experience, that initial experience. So I have a
mm,
couple of questions around that. I have a friend, and I've interviewed her on this show before. Her name is Heather Hamilton.
mm,
She
mm,
has a wonderful book called Returning to Eden, and
mm,
she talks about in her book very similar to what you're saying. She had sort of this crisis. She said
mm.
originally it felt like a nervous breakdown, and then she
Yes,
had this Kundalini experience. Well, she didn't know what that she didn't know what that was until much later. Someone told her, "Oh, you had
yes.
a Kundalini experience," um, and very much like you, kind of set her off in this direction. And so, my question for you is: um, is the Kundalini experience, is it always, and I only this because you and Heather have the similarity. Is the Kundalini experience always sort of driven out of sort of like an event that's really stressful or painful or difficult? Or are there other ways people have the Kundalini experiences?
Well, it's very common that it comes at a crisis because
Yeah.
that ego state is they liken it to a coconut, a hard
Uh,
coconut, but
something
there's
has to,
sweetness
yeah.
inside and
Mhm.
it has to crack it open. It's like we are so identified with the discursive mind, with thoughts, and living in either the past or the future.
Yes.
So, but never in the now. And we're just so caught up in our stories, thinking of suffering, thinking that we're separate, that it's very difficult to break that way, to the mind, to break through, because the Kundalini experience is beyond the mind.
Yes.
But we're so heavy into our persona, we're so heavy into ego structure that
Yes.
it's difficult to come out of it unless something enters your life that's because at that moment when I had the crisis, my mind just stopped. I couldn't think anymore. So the
Yeah.
space opened up and that divinity
Yeah.
just boom
Yeah.
entered. Eckhart Tolle calls it the now, the space in
Yes.
between thoughts. This is what he's referring to because that space is the space of our divine essence.
Yeah.
That's who we truly are. But we're caught up in thoughts and not the space between thoughts to finally free ourselves from this discursive mind story that's always going on. And
Yeah.
that's not easy. I mean,
Yeah.
I get caught in it
Of course. Yeah.
from
It's
time to
it's
time,
hard.
but I know how to get out of it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. This is just a story of suffering. Come on.
Yeah.
Deal with what you have to deal with in the best way you can to resolve it. But no, this is the truth.
Yeah.
That's what spiritual practice is all about in those moments where that discursive mind just takes over with this story of suffering. It is what humanity is going through.
Yeah.
We're going, as they say, a big breakup. And it does feel like a nervous breakdown because you're releasing everything you were told that's not true about yourself.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
What do you have to hang on to then?
Right. Yeah.
So
It seems like yeah,
that's when
that
presence
sort of like,
comes in.
yeah. It seems like
No,
that sort of like there's an ego death, right? Like you were saying before that you were at a place where you were like, I just want to die. I completely give up. I surrender. I'm done. And so
yeah,
you have to get to this place of
yes,
really the ego part of you just saying, I'm
I'm
spent. I'm
done.
done. Yeah, I have nothing. And it's so
I
funny
got
because like
nothing.
that is a spiritual, um, there's that even in Christianity, right? This idea of surrender, right? I surrender all. You have to come to this place at the end of yourself where you're at a place of total surrender and letting go. And it seems like the moment of letting go is the point where it kind of makes sense, right? Now you can enter into the place where you have let go, and now you can see sort of reality for what it is.
Well, yeah, basically you're surrendering identification as an ego separative person. Excuse me, what you're releasing is an ego identification.
Yeah.
And now you're identifying as divinity. So you still have a personality, you still have
Right.
a body, you still have a name, but
Yeah.
you're not identifying as that. You're no longer
Yeah.
living in that as a separative state. Now you're living in this state as you're divine in nature. This is your true state. So it's basically moving from an identification and hanging on to that
Right.
as that's who I really am. I'm my thoughts. I'm a body. I'm this.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
gender. I'm this. This is my
Yeah.
role. To moving, which is very limited, to moving into this. This is the language of light. The
Yeah.
language of light is presence. The language of light is divine consciousness. The language of light is your true divine nature.
Right.
And now we're moving into that. But to move to release that identification only. It's not like
Yes.
you have to have an ego to give up.
Right.
It's just that you're not identifying with it. And now you're having the experience of true experiencing it
Yeah.
because it's not something that comes from your mind, it's
Right.
beyond the mind. And that's why usually it takes a crisis. However, I think what's helping now is more and more people are starting to talk about this so that people can understand what they're going through. You're not going crazy. You're not having a nervous breakdown. You're having an awakening.
Right.
And that feels like a nervous breakdown
Yeah.
because no one has told you about this. So you're wondering what the heck is going on.
Right.
And so this is where we're at. We're at a big crossroads, I call it a crosshairs even, with the
Yeah.
egoic structure and divinity saying, no, we're this, we're this, we're this. This is our true nature of oneness
Yeah.
and bringing it into the world to create a
Yeah.
life from that. And it happens on a very individual way. And oftentimes, most times, it takes going through a crisis because it's hard to break through that mind, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you've read or have you heard the book The Untethered Soul.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that book talks a lot about it. Begins by sort of getting you to recognize that you're not that voice in your head,
Yes.
right? That's not you, and that's the mind, right? That's this
Right.
thing that just keeps going. But you can take a step back from that and recognize, okay, that voice is just going, but I'm
Yes, it
listening, I'm
is.
observing, I'm not that voice, right? And that's
Yes.
also a step towards, like you were saying, Eckhart totally talks about the now. Like
Yes.
I'm not worrying about the past because that's already happened. That's in the
That's
past.
done.
I'm not anxious about the future because that hasn't happened yet, right? So why am I
Right.
worried about that? There's just this moment right now, and in the now is where I discover myself. This is
Yes.
me, right? I'm in this
Yes.
space in the middle while all these other things are kind of going on around me. My mind is going
Yes.
in circles and I'm worried about this or that or concerned about the future or the past. And being able to reach this kind of inner oasis where all of those things kind of fade and you can kind of rest in this, oh, okay, this is me. Here I am, right? I can connect with my true self.
Yes, and it's not, as I say, it's not an easy task
No.
that's been given to humanity in this awakening. But I can tell you that the bliss that I experienced in that awakening is worth everything you have to go through to
Yeah.
give up that lousy ego identification,
Yes.
which is just born in suffering,
Yeah.
and that's all that it is. And it's just an identification, but it's not easy because, as you say, the discursive mind has always been front stage,
Yes. Yes.
and just to give
It's
yourself
running the
some
show.
distance,
Yeah.
distance,
Yeah.
as you say. Basically that's what meditation is for, to try to
Yeah.
identify with this. It's not that meditation is to stop your thinking. No, you can't.
Right. No, you
That'll
can't.
just go on, but you're less identified with it. And then I can tell you, when you live in this state, which I only got to experience for 30 minutes, you're no longer in the discursive mind anymore. Now you're in pure being, a
Yeah.
beingness and a knowingness, which is you cannot understand from the mind state
Yeah.
because it's beyond it. And it's not like then I think, well, what then? Well, you live from a different state of being and you operate from a
Yeah.
different state of being,
Yeah.
and which is our true state that we're in the midst of reclaiming. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot going on now in the world over this,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you
So
can
just real
see.
quick. Yeah. On that point, it is a constant, at least in my experience, I will say it's, because again, it's not about the mind. So I think some of
No.
these concepts, some things you're talking about, right? I can read a book or I can listen to this podcast or
Hmm.
I can grasp mentally the ideas and I can say, oh, I get this concept. I in my
Yeah.
mind, I accept this or I believe this or okay, this is reality. I can
Yeah.
even have an experience of it that's profound and go, wow, it was a
Yes.
meditation. I have this incredible connection. I realized my
Yes.
oneness with the universe and consciousness and all that. Um, but it'll go away. Like,
Yes.
2 days later or 30 minutes later,
Yes.
you could be right back into the old way. So it's because it's not in the mind, right? And so it's not about changing your mind. It's not about having the
No.
information. Oh, I know this now. I
No.
can answer these questions. No, it's
No.
about the being of it. Like finding ways to, whether that's meditation or any other practices that you
Whatever
have.
it is.
Yeah,
Just being in
you
nature.
need reminders, right, to kind of help you
Yes.
kind of return to that place of being, and not get constantly pulled back into the doing.
Exactly. And sometimes being in nature will really help
Yeah,
because nature is a part of where we're all one. So nature has a living consciousness to it. I mean, that's where
yes,
homeopathic remedies come from. And by the way, they never expire,
yeah,
and they are living consciousness, which can help to heal the consciousness of humanity by releasing it to harmony, bringing it back to harmony through the law of like here's like. So the homeopathy is consciousness-based medicine. It really helps to help remove the identification with it. But that's another very esoteric conversation
sure,
that I love having about homeopathic medicine. This is why homeopathic medicine is the second most popular system of medicine in the world. But in the United States, it isn't because it's so suppressed.
Yes, it
But people
is.
are like, wait a minute, drugs may help me, it might save my life, but I want to be cured. I want prevention. I want to come into
Yeah.
harmony mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I don't want to live in a chronic state
Yes.
of health decline. So, this is why, these systems have, and of course, the old way wants to hold on to the old ways. The egoic structure wants to hold on to itself. Oh, no, don't you dare.
Oh, yeah.
Can't
It'll
live
fight you.
without me, says the ego,
That's
you
right.
know. And
Exactly.
remember talking to a psychologist once who said, you need an ego. You have to have an ego. And I said, well, that's not my experience. I mean, you have a body. I said, you just don't have to identify with yourself
Yeah. Yeah.
as this egoic structure. You
Yeah.
have, identify more with this. And this is what spiritual practice is all about.
That's
It's
right.
spiritual remembering,
Yes.
remembering. It's a constant remembering because we've lived for all the time on this earth under this egoic construct. So it's not so easy
No.
to get free of that. And, but the other is so worth it. And everybody, as you can tell, so many people are having these
Yeah.
different experiences. And usually they'll have a moment where they'll say, wait a minute, all of a sudden the field will open up to them of their
Uh,
divinity. And they go,
uh.
wow, that's the truth. And then bam, back into,
Yep.
oh, I'm just such a failure.
Right.
I mean, it's that push pull. That's why I say we're at sort of at a crosshairs with
Yeah.
ourselves and with that energy. But so many people are going, that's why it's nice to have connections with other people who are going through this to be,
Right.
to have support as we go through it and to remember, if you have a
Yeah.
good friend who's involved in this, you can help each other remember, go to lunch with each other,
Yeah.
talk about whatever issues you're dealing with now to help you resolve it, resolve things. This
Right.
is what I
Yeah.
do. So,
Yeah.
and just to have, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to ask you, we have like 10 minutes left, so I don't want to make sure I get to this question for you. So a couple of times throughout this interview, you've talked about that we're in this place of awakening and that, um, and so I'm curious what you mean by that. Cause like I personally, like I'm in a place now better than I've ever been of sort of like moving in the direction of what you're talking about. And I've had these experiences myself. Um, but I feel like, whereas I feel like these are the experiences that can sort of redeem all of humanity. Like humanity needs to have this awareness of sort of a shared divinity, a shared consciousness, a shared humanity. I feel like and we are in a place where, frankly, what I see mostly right now is all the division. I think we are more divided than we have ever been at almost every single level, and I even feel like this is on purpose. Like there are structures and systems in place that benefit by keeping us divided, by keeping us against one another, this us and them mentality, whether it's politics or just every level. Um, and so it just makes me feel like, well, we're in a place where we're experiencing so much division and conflict, as humanity. We desperately need the connection and the oneness and the divinity and the consciousness
Mm.
to sort of rescue us from it. But I don't know that I see it happening yet. In other words, I see the problem, I see the solution. I wonder how can we get to the place that we can break through, and have this awakening. Is there any thoughts you have about that?
Well, it is happening.
Yeah,
Awakening happens in chaos.
right.
It happens in chaos
And we have a lot of
because
chaos.
it's just showing us, quite frankly, you want to live this way? You want to live this way? Or do you want to live this way?
Yeah,
Which way do you want to live?
yeah,
This is what's being shown to us in absolute clarity. I mean, nothing could be clearer. So it's like, here's your choice. This is your free will. This is what free will is, and it's not free. It's going to cost you. You want to
yeah,
live this way, you're going to live in suffering. You want to live this way, you can live in freedom.
yeah,
So that's why I call it a crosshairs. We're at this, it's like,
yeah,
it's like this big crash. And this is what's being shown to us. This is why we can see division so clearly. It's either the egoic way, and you keep going, and my way or the highway,
Right, right.
or you
And
can
that's going to
awaken
lead
to
to
your,
destruction and more conflict. Yeah,
well, in chaos, I think Eckhart Tolle opens his book by saying transformation happens in chaos.
yeah,
And usually it's an individual chaos. That's why you call it a life crisis, a crisis event, because it
right.
happens in chaos.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody who's ever walked into divinity without having to, even the great beings, the
yeah,
sages,
yes,
this has happened to,
yes.
you know.
Right,
I mean,
right.
look what
Well,
happened to, a friend of ours called Jesus. So,
yes.
I mean,
A lot of suffering.
and all the sages, not just him, all the
Yeah,
sages, all of them, men
yeah,
and women.
yes.
And
Yeah,
so this is what's happening. We're going through this, we're rendering, you know,
yeah,
out, and this is why it's so clear. This is why it's becoming clearer. It appears that we're separate. No,
yeah,
it's showing you what it's like to live separate,
right.
and all the chaos and the hate and the
Mm,
division and the
yeah,
violence and all of this, to show you your free will is to, you can either choose to stay here, or you can choose to stay here. There's your free will.
yeah,
You have free will. You can choose whatever you want. Don't be blaming it on some personalized version of God. Why is God doing this? No, why are
right.
we doing it?
Thank you.
You
Thank you.
know, I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
what the
anytime,
heck?
yeah. Anytime someone
You
looks
when
at
you
suffering, yeah, some people looks at the suffering in the world and like, how can God allow this suffering? It's like, who are you talking to? You're
That's
talking to
exactly
some
right.
God up there separate from yourself. Like, hey, God up
Yes,
there somewhere. Why are you like, there's
somewhere.
God is in
Well,
you.
when
Talk to
we
yourself.
personalize divinity, we outsource it.
That's right.
When we accept our divine nature, remember, it's Brahman. It's this
Yeah.
field of presence, of
Yeah.
divine presence. So, no, there's no way out but in, as they
Yeah.
say. And this is where we're at.
Yes.
And so people are becoming more and more horrified by what they
Right.
see, and for good reason,
Yeah.
because this is what the ego creates. It creates horror.
Yes.
This is what it does.
Yes.
Horror and chaos. Remember that word chaos.
Yes.
A lot of chaos. You can see it in the world. A lot.
Yeah.
And that's created from the egoic structures and
Yeah. Thank
identifying
you.
as that separative thing.
Yeah. Thank
And
you. Thank you. Thank you.
this is why it's so important to awaken. Why it's so important that we speak
Yeah.
about this. Because we're pointing out why things are a mess. This is why they're a mess. We made it
Right.
a mess,
Right.
you know.
And now we have a
And
choice, right? We have the choice now to say we can keep
yes,
going this way, or there's another option, right? We could choose something else, something much better.
that's the option for humanity at this time.
Yeah.
No one's forcing you into self-realization.
Yeah.
No one's going to
Right.
drag you there. You're
Right.
going
It
to take
doesn't work that
yourself.
way. Right. No
That's
one.
I
Yeah.
wish
Yeah.
it worked that way. Please
Right.
drag me there. You know,
Yeah.
but it's constant practice of remembering. It's a practice of remembering
Yeah.
our true nature, and then getting support from people who've been through this or going through this, who understand it, so that you
Yeah.
don't feel so alone, because basically people feel really alone in this. In
Yeah.
some ways it is a kind of a lonely path of return, but
Yeah.
in other ways you've got community. That's what community is for, to
Yeah.
help support each other as we're traveling home to our
Uh-huh.
true state, to you know help us, soothe us as we're dealing with issues in our lives that are difficult, communications with people that are hard, but you want to
Yeah.
do it from a state of love, and to releasing and to honesty, and as much as one can do that. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Absolutely.
just you've got to do it in here, but this is why we need to support each other. We need to create structures that really do support that, and sort of your work and the podcasts that are happening
Yeah.
with Buddha at the Gas Pump,
Yes.
with Rick Archer.
Yes.
If you go on my website, you can listen to my most recent interview with him, goes
Yeah.
a little bit more depth.
Yeah.
So this is why
Absolutely.
we need these, wonderful podcasts and the work that you're doing
Yeah.
and the choir's doing. And
Yeah. Well,
this is why we need it.
yeah. Well, I'm
We do
very,
the
thank
best we
you.
can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm very honored and very blessed that you took time, Mary, to come and talk with us on the podcast. And I'm very honored to say that Quoir will be publishing the second edition to your book, Out of the Blue, hopefully this year. And excited about that and
Yes,
just getting to share that with people.
certainly, definitely this year.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Thank
And
you. And then, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that when it was originally published by Hay House, it was published because Wayne Dyer said that my experience of self-realization was the best that he has ever read in his 30 years. And
Yeah.
that's why he had Hay House publish the book. Unfortunately, he died 3 months before it came out, so it kind of died on the shelves. But this is
Yeah.
why I'm doing a second edition with you, Keith,
Yeah.
because your company can bring it forward more, and I'll do a second edition, adding a heck of a lot more in, just
Yeah.
more explanations, more of everything, more chapters. So thank you,
Yeah.
Keith, for doing that.
Oh, thank you. I'm just glad the universe brought us together.
Me too.
And that we get to work together on this and like you get to you've lived it, you're going to write it, Quoir gets to publish it and put it out there and promote it, and hopefully more people will find the book and hopefully get to experience their own um, that
Mm,
own inner divinity and that
yes,
Brahma and that
for sure.
consciousness. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Mary. And
Right.
then where can people, you mentioned your website, but where else can people find you and follow you if they want to keep up with you?
MaryTerhune.com.
Yeah,
On that, you can go to Conversations with Mary. It has my email on there as well. And
good.
that's how you can find me. I'm also going to be doing classes on homeopathy with your with you
Oh yeah, Quoir
folks, an
Academy. Yeah,
introduction to homeopathy to
yeah.
help people understand what it is and to reclaim that in their lives too. So
Yeah, I'm very excited about that too. Yeah, looking forward to that. Awesome. Well, Mary, thank you again. Thanks for being on the show.
thanks, Keith. A pleasure to speak with
Yeah.
you.
And
Take
for
care.
everyone listening, just real quick before we go, I need to mention we are sponsored by the Wild Goose Festival. If you go to wildgoosefestival.org, go and sign up there for that event coming up this summer. You'll get $50 off your, what is it, an adult weekend pass for wildgoosefestival.org if you use the promo code A-HELL. Scary code, but
Whoa.
a great event.
Whoa.
Go check it out. And also, if you like this podcast, you'll like the book, Second Cup with Keith. There's a book version. Go check that out on Amazon. And my book, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas, is available on Amazon. Go check that out as well. Mary, again, thank you so much for being here. And
Thank
I'd
you,
love to have you
Keith.
back again sometime.
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right.
Bye bye.